The rain hammered against the palace windows like 1,000 angry fists. Michael stood at his post, eyes scanning the darkened corridor. It was 2:47 in the morning. Nothing ever happened at this hour. Nothing was supposed to happen. Then he heard footsteps. Soft, deliberate, coming from the west. Wing where no one should be walking at this time of night. Michael's hand moved instinctively to his radio, but something made him pause. The footsteps weren't hurried or suspicious. They were measured calm, the walk of someone who belonged. When the figure emerged from the shadows, Michael's breath caught in his throat. It was Prince William, alone. No security detail. No advisors. Just him, wearing a dark coat and moving with purpose through a part of the palace most people had forgotten existed. William noticed.
"Oh, Michael."
Immediately, their eyes met. For a moment, neither man moved. The prince's face was unreadable, but there was something in his expression. Worry, maybe. Or determination. Michael had been trained for dozens of scenarios, but not this one. Not a member of the royal family, wandering alone in the middle of the night through restricted corridors. Before you find out what happens next, make sure you're subscribed to this channel. We share the most incredible true stories you won't hear anywhere else. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss what happens next. William approached slowly. Michael straightened, unsure whether to speak or remain silent. The protocol manual didn't cover midnight encounters in forgotten hallways. The prince stopped 3 feet away, close enough that Michael could see the tension in his jaw, the tired lines around his eyes. "I need you to forget you saw me tonight," William said quietly. His voice was steady, but there was an edge to it, an urgency that made Michael's pulse quicken. Michael swallowed. "Your Highness, I please." William stepped closer. "I'm asking you as a person, not as a prince. What I'm doing tonight matters. It matters more than you know. But if anyone finds out, it could cause serious problems. Not just for me." The words hung in the air between them. Michael had served the royal household for 6 years. He'd taken an oath. He'd been trained to report everything, to trust the system, to follow procedure without question. But standing there in that dim corridor with rain drumming overhead, he realized he was being asked to make a choice that could define his entire career. William's phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced at it quickly, and whatever he saw made his expression tighten. "I have to go. Someone's waiting. I'm asking you to trust me, Michael."
"Oh, Michael."
Felt ice run down his spine. The prince knew his name. Of course he did. William had probably known the names of every guard in the palace since he was a child. But hearing it spoken aloud in this moment made everything feel more personal, more real. "How long will you be gone, sir?" Michael heard himself ask. 2 hours. Maybe 3. William was already moving toward the side exit, the one that led to the old gardens, the one that hadn't been used in months. "Your Highness, if something happens to you," William turned back, "then you did your duty by letting me go. This meeting is important, Michael. Lives depend on it." With that, he disappeared into the darkness beyond the door. Michael stood frozen, his mind racing. Lives depend on it. What did that mean? Who was William meeting? And why did it have to happen in secret, in the dead of night, with no protection? The rain continued to fall. The corridor was silent again. Michael reached for his radio. His finger hovered over the button. One call could bring the entire security team running. One call could put procedures in motion that would find William within minutes. One call could save the prince from whatever danger might be waiting outside those walls, but one call could also destroy whatever William was trying to accomplish. Michael's hand began to shake. Michael lowered the radio. The decision felt like jumping off a cliff. He was choosing to let a member of the royal family walk into the night alone, unprotected, for reasons he didn't understand. Every instinct screamed at him to raise the alarm. But something in William's voice had been genuine. Desperate even. He moved to the window overlooking the old gardens. Through the rain, he could barely make out a dark figure moving between the hedgerows. William was heading toward the back gate, the one that opened onto a narrow service road used only by maintenance vehicles. Michael's stomach twisted. This wasn't just a walk. This was an escape. Minutes crawled by like hours. Michael's mind ran through every terrible possibility: kidnapping, ambush, an accident. What would he tell the other guards when William didn't return? What would he tell the family? He imagined the headlines, the investigations, the end of his career, the end of everything. But underneath the fear was something else. Curiosity. What could be so important that a prince would risk everything to attend a secret meeting? What kind of person had that much pull over someone who would one day be king? At 3:15, movement near the gate caught his eye. Two figures. One was definitely William based on the height and build. The other was smaller, wrapped in a dark raincoat with the hood pulled up. They stood close together, talking. Michael couldn't hear the words, but he could see the body language. Urgent gestures. William's hand on the other person's shoulder, the hooded figure stepping back, then forward again. This wasn't a casual conversation. This was a confrontation. Or a negotiation. Something heavy was being discussed out there in the rain. Michael glanced at his watch. His shift change was in 2 hours. If William wasn't back by then, someone else would take over this post. Someone who hadn't made a promise. Someone who would follow procedure. The window of secrecy was closing. The hooded figure pulled something from their coat. Michael tensed, his hand moving to his sidearm. But it wasn't a weapon. It was an envelope. A large manila envelope that looked thick with contents. William took it carefully, studying it for a moment before tucking it inside his own jacket. Then something unexpected happened. The hooded figure reached up and pulled back their hood. Even through the rain and darkness, Michael could see her face. A woman, maybe in her late 30s, with dark hair plastered to her skull by the downpour. She was crying. William pulled her into an embrace, holding her as her shoulders shook. Whatever this meeting was about, it wasn't political intrigue or royal scandal. This was personal, deeply personal. Michael felt a pang of guilt for watching such a private moment, but he couldn't look away. He needed to understand. The woman pulled back from William, said something else, and then turned to leave. She didn't go toward the service road. Instead, she walked to a small gap in the hedge that Michael hadn't even known existed. A secret passage. She slipped through and vanished. William stood alone in the rain for a long moment. His hand pressed against his jacket where the envelope was hidden. His head was bowed. His shoulders rose and fell with deep breaths. Then he turned and began walking back toward the palace. Michael moved quickly away from the window and returned to his post. He forced his expression into neutrality, his posture into the stance of a guard who had seen nothing, heard nothing, knew nothing. His heart pounded so hard he was sure William would hear it when he came back inside. The door opened. William stepped through, water dripping from his coat onto the ancient stone floor. He looked at Michael. Neither spoke for several seconds. "Thank you," William said finally. His voice was rough with emotion. Michael nodded. "Sir, is everything all right?" "No." William's honesty was startling. "But it will be. Or at least, I hope it will be. What I received tonight could help a lot of people. But it's going to make things very complicated very soon." "Complicated how?" William smiled, but there was no happiness in it. "You'll find out. Everyone will. Probably within the week. When the story breaks, there's going to be chaos. People will ask questions. They'll wonder how certain information got out, how it got to the right people. Some will suspect me. They'll investigate. They'll look at security footage and guard logs." Michael felt cold dread settle in his stomach. "They'll see that I was here." "Yes. And they'll ask what you saw, what you did." William met his eyes directly. "I can't tell you what to say, Michael. That has to be your choice. But I want you to know that what happened tonight was the right thing. Even if it doesn't look that way when everything comes out." "What's in the envelope, sir?" "Proof. Evidence that powerful people have been doing terrible things. Things that should have been stopped years ago." William's jaw tightened. "A friend of mine has been trying to expose them. She's been gathering evidence, putting herself in danger." Tonight she gave me everything she had. She asked me to make sure it reaches people who can actually do something about it. Why you? Why not go through proper channels? Because some of the people involved are part of those proper channels. She needed someone she could trust. Someone with the influence to make sure the truth doesn't get buried. William paused. Her brother died because of what these people did. She's lost everything trying to get justice for him. I couldn't say no. Michael understood then. This wasn't about politics or power. This was about a promise made to someone in pain. About using privilege for something meaningful. When they asked me what I saw tonight, Michael said slowly, I'll tell them the truth. That you left alone and came back safely. That you seemed upset but determined. That's all I know. William's expression softened. That might not be enough to protect you. Then it's not enough. Michael straightened. But it's the truth, sir. And sometimes that's all a man has. The prince studied him for a long moment, then nodded. You're a good man, Michael. I won't forget this. William walked away down the corridor, his wet footsteps echoing in the silence. Michael watched him go, knowing that everything had just changed. The envelope inside William's jacket was a ticking time bomb. When it exploded, the shockwaves would reach everyone, including one palace guard who had made the choice to look away. 4 days passed. 4 days of Michael going through his shifts like a robot, waiting for the hammer to fall. He barely slept. Every time a supervisor approached, every time security held an unscheduled meeting, his pulse spiked. But nothing happened. The palace continued its usual rhythm. Guards changed posts. Tours went through the public areas. Life went on. Then, on the 5th morning, the story broke. Michael was having breakfast in the guards' mess when someone turned up the television. A news anchor's face filled the screen, grave and intense. Behind her, a headline scrolled, Massive charity fraud exposed, royal source provided evidence.
Ow.
The room fell silent. Every guard stopped eating, stopped talking, stopped moving. They all watched as the anchor explained how millions of pounds donated to a children's charity had been systematically stolen over 7 years. How the money had lined the pockets of board members, administrators, and even some government officials. How sick children had gone without treatment, while wealthy criminals built second homes and bought luxury cars, and how an anonymous source with royal connections had provided investigators with the evidence needed to bring down the entire operation. Michael's coffee tasted like ash in his mouth. He set down the cup carefully, afraid his shaking hands would betray him. Around the room, guards were muttering to each other, shocked and angry. Children's charity, the lowest form of theft. Everyone agreed the criminals deserved whatever was coming to them. But then a senior guard named Thompson spoke up. Anonymous source with royal connections? That means someone in this palace leaked information. Someone broke protocol. When they find out who that person's finished, several heads nodded. The guard code was absolute. No exceptions. No matter how good the cause, you didn't go outside the chain of command. You didn't make independent decisions about royal security. You followed orders. Michael felt sick. He'd known there would be consequences, but hearing it stated so bluntly made it real. He stood up, his breakfast unfinished, and headed for the door. He needed air. He needed to think. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A text from an unknown number, loading dock. Sure minutes. Come alone. Michael's breath caught. William wanted to meet, but why? And why the loading dock? One of the least monitored areas of the palace? He glanced around to make sure no one was watching, then changed direction. His mind raced as he walked. Maybe William wanted to warn him. Maybe the investigation was closing in. Maybe this was goodbye before Michael got fired, or worse. The loading dock was empty when he arrived. Morning fog clung to the ground, making everything look ghostly and unreal. Michael checked his watch. Right on time. He waited. William emerged from behind a delivery truck, dressed casually in jeans and a jacket. He looked tired, but there was something lighter about him. A weight lifted. You've seen the news, William said. It wasn't a question. Everyone's seen it, sir. It's all anyone's talking about. Good. That's exactly what needs to happen. The more attention this gets, the harder it'll be for anyone to bury it.
Ow.
William moved closer. The police arrested 6 people this morning. 3 more are expected to be charged by the end of the week. The charity's assets have been frozen. Every donation is being audited. That's good, Michael said carefully. Justice for those kids. Yes. But there's a problem. William's expression darkened. The investigation is looking into how the evidence was obtained. They're trying to identify the source. They know it came from inside the organization, from someone who had access to financial records and internal communications. They're also looking at who that person gave the information to. They're looking at you. It's not officially. Not yet, but there are questions. Why would someone risk everything to get evidence to me specifically? What's my connection to the case? William paused. They pulled security footage. They are reviewing guard logs. They're looking for anything unusual from the past 2 weeks. Michael felt his career crumbling around him. They'll see I was on duty that night. They'll ask questions. Yes. And you need to be ready with answers. William reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I'm not going to tell you what to say. I can't do that. But I can tell you what happened from my perspective, and you can decide how much you want to share. He handed Michael the paper. It was a timeline written in neat handwriting. William's movements that night, times, locations, but there was something missing. No mention of the woman, no mention of the envelope, no mention of what actually happened in the garden. This is what I'm telling investigators if they ask, William explained. I couldn't sleep. I went for a walk through the palace. I ended up in the old wing, then went out to the gardens for some air. I was gone about 40 minutes. When I came back in, you were at your post. We exchanged a few words. Nothing unusual. That's not what happened, sir. No, but it's a version of events that protects the woman who risked everything to expose those criminals. If investigators find out about her, they'll make her life hell. They'll paint her as a thief, a traitor to her former employers. They'll destroy her to undermine the evidence. William's voice was hard. I won't let that happen to her. She's been through enough, Michael understood. The lie was to protect someone who deserved protecting, but it was still a lie. And if he told it, he'd be risking everything for people he didn't even know. What if they don't believe me? Michael asked, then we both deal with the consequences. But Michael, they have no proof of anything else. No cameras in that part of the palace. No witnesses, except you and me. Unless you tell them what really happened, there's nothing they can do. A van pulled up to the loading dock. Delivery drivers got out and started unloading boxes. The private moment was ending. William glanced at them, then back at Michael. I know I'm asking a lot. I know you've already done more than anyone should have to, but I need you to hold on a little longer. Can you do that? Michael looked at the paper in his hands, then at the prince who'd trusted him with a secret that could bring down powerful people. He thought about sick children who'd been denied help, about a woman who'd lost her brother and sacrificed everything for justice. Yes, sir. I can do that. Relief flooded William's face. Thank you. And Michael? When this is over, when the trials are done and those criminals are in prison, I'll make sure everyone knows what you did. You won't be forgotten. I'm not doing it to be remembered. William smiled, and this time it was genuine.
I know.
That's exactly why you're the right person. He walked away, disappearing into the fog like he'd never been there at all. Michael stood alone with a paper full of half-truths and a choice that had already been made. The investigation was coming, and he'd be ready. Asterisk, the investigators arrived 2 days later. 3 of them, dressed in plain suits, carrying briefcases and tablets loaded with questions. They set up in a conference room typically used for staff training and began calling in guards one by one. Michael watched them go in and come out, trying to read their faces for clues about what was being asked. Most guards were in and out within 10 minutes. Their testimonies were simple because they had nothing to report. Night shifts were usually uneventful. Nothing unusual had happened in their sections. They'd seen nothing, heard nothing, knew nothing. But Michael's interview lasted. 45 minutes. The lead investigator was a woman named Detective Harrow. She had sharp eyes and a calm voice that somehow made every question feel like an accusation. She asked Michael about his schedule that night, about his patrol route, about every movement he'd made between midnight and 6 a.m. "You were stationed in the West Corridor," she said, consulting her notes. "That's an unusual post. Not much traffic through there. It's part of the rotation," Michael replied, keeping his voice steady. "Every guard does a shift there eventually. But that particular night, any reason it was you?" "Just the schedule. You can check with the duty officer." Harrow nodded slowly, making a note. "Did you see anyone during your shift? Anyone who shouldn't have been there?" This was it. The moment the lie would begin, or the truth would come out. Michael thought about the paper William had given him. About sick children who deserved justice. About a woman crying in the rain. "Prince William came through around 3 a.m., Michael said. "He said he couldn't sleep and was taking a walk." The room went quiet. The other two investigators looked up from their tablets. Harrow leaned forward slightly. "You're certain?" "Yes, ma'am. I've been on duty when he's passed before." "I recognized him immediately. Was he alone?" "Yes, no security detail." "No advisors?" "Just him." Harrow exchanged glances with her colleagues. "Did he say where he was going?" "He mentioned the old gardens." "Wanted some air?" Michael kept his answers short, factual, emotionless, the way he'd been trained. "How long was he gone?" "About 40 minutes, maybe a bit less. And when he returned, he seemed tired." We exchanged a few words. "Nothing unusual?" Then he went back to his quarters. Harrow sat back, studying Michael's face. The silence stretched out. This was a tactic, Michael knew. Make people uncomfortable. Wait for them to fill the silence with nervous explanations that revealed more than they intended. Michael said nothing. "Did Prince William seem agitated?" Harrow asked finally. "Upset? Worried?" "He seemed like someone who couldn't sleep. Restless, maybe. But not upset? Did he carry anything? Envelope, bag, papers?" Michael's heart rate spiked, but he kept his expression neutral. "Not that I noticed." It was dim in that corridor, but his hand seemed empty. Another note. Another long silence. "Michael, I'm going to be direct with you." Harrow set down her pen. "We know that evidence in a major fraud case was delivered to someone with royal connections approximately 1 week ago. We know it happened at night. We know the palace was involved somehow. Now you're telling me that Prince William was walking around alone, without security, in a restricted area during that exact time frame? You understand how that looks." "I understand that coincidences happen," Michael said carefully. "I also understand that Prince William has lived in this palace his entire life. He walks wherever he wants, whenever he wants. That's not unusual, except when it aligns with a criminal investigation. With respect, ma'am, I can't speak to any investigation. I can only tell you what I saw. And what I saw was a member of the royal family taking a walk because he couldn't sleep." Harrow's jaw tightened. She wasn't happy, but she also had nothing to push against. No proof, no witnesses. No evidence except a guard's testimony that revealed nothing useful. "If we find out you're lying," she said quietly, "if we discover you've withheld information or protected someone who interfered with a criminal case, you'll face serious consequences. We're talking about conspiracy, obstruction of justice, possibly even charges related to the original fraud." Michael felt cold sweat on his back, but he met her eyes steadily. "I'm not lying. I've told you everything I know. It's not everything I saw," he thought. "But everything I know?" Harrow stared at him for another long moment, then nodded to her colleagues. "That's all for now. Don't leave town. We may have follow-up questions." Michael stood, nodded respectfully, and walked out of the room. His legs felt shaky, but he kept his stride even until he was around the corner and out of sight. Then he leaned against the wall, breathing hard. He'd done it. He'd lied to investigators and somehow made them believe him, or at least given them nothing they could use to prove otherwise. His phone buzzed. Another text from the unknown number. "Thank you. Stay strong." Michael deleted the message and went back to his post. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Other guards asked him what the investigators had wanted, and he gave them the same version he'd given Harrow. Just routine questions. Nothing important. They seemed to accept it. But Thompson, the senior guard who'd spoken in the mess hall, pulled him aside that evening. "You were in there a long time," Thompson said. His voice was neutral, but his eyes were searching. They had a lot of questions about that wing of the palace. Security protocols, sight lines, that sort of thing. "That's all?" Michael nodded. "That's all." Thompson studied him for a moment longer, then clapped him on the shoulder. "You're a good lad, Michael. Steady under pressure. That's important in this job." "Yes, sir." "Just remember, we all take an oath. Loyalty to the crown, to the family, to each other. That oath doesn't bend for anything, no matter how good the reason might seem." The words hung in the air like a warning. Thompson knew something. Maybe not the details, but he sensed that Michael was walking a dangerous line. "I remember my oath," Michael said quietly. "I think about it every day." Good, because oaths are all we have sometimes. They're what separate us from people who make decisions based on feelings instead of duty. Thompson walked away, leaving Michael alone with his thoughts. The older guard was right about one thing. Oaths were important, but so was conscience. And sometimes, when those two things came into conflict, a person had to choose which one mattered more. Michael had made his choice. Now he just had to live with it, and hope that living with it didn't mean watching everything fall apart. 3 weeks passed. The charity fraud scandal grew bigger with each day. More arrests. More evidence of corruption that reached higher than anyone had initially suspected. 2 members of parliament resigned. A prominent businessman fled the country. The media couldn't get enough of it. Through it all, Michael went about his duties. He kept his head down, followed orders, tried not to think about the investigators who still occasionally showed up at the palace asking questions. They'd interviewed him twice more, each time pushing harder, but he'd stuck to his story. William couldn't sleep. Went for a walk, came back. Nothing unusual, but the pressure was building. He could feel it in the way other guards looked at him sometimes. In the whispered conversations that stopped when he entered a room, Thompson's warning had spread through the ranks. Someone had helped leak information. Someone had broken protocol. And suspicion was circling closer to Michael with each passing day. Then, on a gray Tuesday morning, everything changed. Michael was called to the office of Captain Morrison, head of palace security. This wasn't a routine meeting. Morrison was the kind of man who only got involved when something serious was happening. Michael knocked on the door, his stomach tight with anxiety. "Come in," Morrison's voice called. Michael entered to find Morrison behind his desk, looking older and more tired than usual. But he wasn't alone. Detective Harrow sat in one of the chairs facing the desk, and beside her, in a suit that looked uncomfortable on his athletic frame, was Prince William. Michael froze in the doorway. "Close the door and sit down, Michael," Morrison said. His tone was impossible to read. Michael obeyed, taking the empty chair. He glanced at William. The prince's expression gave nothing away. Professional, neutral, the face of someone trained, from birth to hide what they were really thinking. Morrison opened a folder on his desk. "Michael, we've reached a point in this investigation where clarity is needed. Detective Harrow has been reviewing testimony and evidence for weeks. She's convinced that information was passed through this palace on the night in question. She's also convinced that you know more than you've said." Michael's mouth went dry. "Sir, I've told the investigators everything I know." "That's the problem," Harrow interjected. "You've been very careful with your words. Everything you know. Not everything you saw. Not everything that happened. You're playing semantic games, and it's not going unnoticed." "I've been truthful. You've been precisely truthful," Harrow corrected, "which is different from being completely truthful. And I'm done playing that game." She pulled out her own tablet, tapped a few times, then turned it to face Michael. On the screen was a photo. The woman from the garden, the one who'd given William the envelope. "Her name is Sarah Keating," Harrow said. "She worked for the charity as a senior accountant." Her brother was diagnosed with leukemia 4 years ago. The charity promised to cover his treatment. Instead, they denied his claim and kept the donated funds. He died 18 months ago. Sarah has been gathering evidence ever since, waiting for the right moment and the right person to help her expose the truth. Michael said nothing. His heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. We know she met with Prince William, Harrow continued. We know it happened at night, somewhere on or near palace grounds. What we don't know is exactly where, exactly when, or who facilitated that meeting. She leaned forward. But I think you do. The room was silent. Michael could feel 3 sets of eyes on him. Morrison, waiting for an explanation. Harrow, waiting for a confession. And William, sitting perfectly still, his face unreadable. I can't help you, Michael, said finally. I've told you what I saw. Then let me tell you what I think happened. Harrow's voice was cold now. I think Sarah Keating contacted Prince William somehow. I think she asked to meet privately. I think he agreed because he's known for his charitable work, and he wanted to help. I think he went out to meet her alone, without security, because he knew his staff would never allow it if he asked permission. And I think you saw him leave and chose not to report it. Every word was accurate. Every word was damning. Michael felt sweat running down his spine. If that's true, Harrow continued, then you're guilty of gross negligence at minimum. You let a member of the royal family leave the palace unprotected to meet with an unknown person in the middle of the night. Anything could have happened to him, and you said nothing. But nothing did happen to me. William spoke for the first time. His voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. I'm here. I'm fine. Michael's supposed negligence resulted in no harm to anyone. I understand that, Captain. But sometimes protecting people means more than just guarding their physical safety. Sometimes it means helping them do what's right, even when it's complicated. Harrow stood up abruptly. This is exactly the problem. You're both acting like laws and rules are optional when the cause feels noble enough. But that's not how society works. That's not how justice works. If you broke protocol to help expose fraud, who's to say you won't break protocol for something less noble next time? Because I wouldn't, Michael said, surprising himself. All 3 of them turned to look at him. You're right. I saw Prince William leave that night. I made a choice not to report it. I made that choice because he asked me to trust him, and because I could see it mattered. Would I do it again for just anyone? No. Would I do it if I thought someone was in real danger? No. But I did it that one time, for that one reason, and I'd make the same choice again. Morrison's face darkened. Michael, you're confessing to a serious breach of duty? No, sir. And I'm ready to accept the consequences. But I won't pretend I regret it. Children got justice because of what happened that night. A woman got to honor her brother's memory, and the only cost was my career. That seems like a fair trade to me. It's not your decision to make, Harrow said sharply. You don't get to decide which rules matter and which don't based on your personal feelings. Then what do I base it on? Orders from people who might be corrupt themselves? Procedures written by committees who've never faced a real moral choice? I'm not saying I'm always right, but I am saying that sometimes doing the right thing means breaking the rules. William stood up. Detective Harrow, Captain Morrison, I need to say something. Michael is taking blame for decisions I made. I'm the one who asked him to let me leave. I'm the one who told him it was important. I put him in an impossible position, and he handled it with more integrity than most people would have. Your Highness, that doesn't excuse Morrison began? It doesn't excuse anything, William agreed. But it should matter when you're deciding what happens next. Michael broke protocol to help me prevent a terrible injustice. If you punish him for that, you're sending a message that following rules is more important than doing what's right. Is that really the message you want to send? The room fell silent. Morrison and Harrow exchanged a long look. Some unspoken communication passed between them. Finally, Harrow sighed. This isn't over, she said, gathering her things. My investigation continues. But Michael, I'll note in my report that you eventually provided truthful testimony when pressed. That might count for something. She left. The door closed behind her with a soft click. Morrison stood up slowly, like his bones ached. Michael, I'm suspending you, pending a full review. 2 weeks, with pay. During that time, a committee will decide whether you keep your position or face dismissal. I understand, sir. I hope you do. Because regardless of how this turns out, you've changed something here. You've shown other guards that sometimes the rules can be bent. That's dangerous. That's how chaos starts. Or how justice happens, William said quietly. Morrison looked at the prince for a long moment, then shook his head. Your Highness, with all due respect, you're not the one who has to maintain order. You're not the one who has to look at dozens of young guards and convince them that discipline matters. You gotta be the hero. We have to clean up the mess. He walked out, leaving Michael and William alone. William and Michael sat in silence for several minutes. The weight of what had just happened hung between them like smoke. Michael's career was in jeopardy. His reputation was damaged. Everything he'd worked for was on the line. I'm sorry, William said finally. I should have protected you better. I should have found a way to keep you out of this. Gave me a choice, sir. I made it freely. That's more than most people get. A choice between your conscience and your career. That's not really a choice at all. William ran a hand through his hair. Morrison is right about one thing. I gotta be the hero. I get to be the prince who helped expose corruption and get justice for sick children. The media loves that story. But you're the one who actually took the risk, and you're the one facing consequences. What about Sarah? The woman who gave you the evidence? She's safe. The prosecutors granted her immunity in exchange for testimony. She'll have to appear at the trials, but after that, she can move on with her life. Start over. William smiled slightly. She asked about you, actually. Wanted to know if the guard who helped us that night was okay? I couldn't give her a good answer. Michael thought about that. A woman he'd never spoken to, never met properly, was concerned about his well-being. All because he'd chosen to look away for a few hours one rainy night. I'll be fine, Michael said, trying to sound convincing. Even if I lose my position here, I'll find something else. I have skills. I have training. Shouldn't have to start over. Not for this. William stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the palace grounds. I'm going to make a statement. A public one. I'm going to explain my role in exposing the fraud. And I'm going to make it clear that I asked you to respect my privacy that night. I'll take full responsibility. Sir, if you do that, if I do that, it becomes a story about me making an independent decision as an adult member of the royal family. It becomes about my right to move freely and my choice to help someone in need. They can criticize me all they want, but they can't fire me. I was born into this job. William turned back to face Michael, but they can fire you. So I'm going to make sure everyone understands that you were put in an impossible situation and handled it with grace. That might not be enough, might not be, but it's what I can do. William's expression was determined, and I'm going to push for something else. I'm going to recommend that the palace update its protocols. Create a system where guards can flag situations that don't fit normal procedures without immediately triggering a full alert. Give people like you the ability to use judgment without destroying their careers. Captain Morrison won't like that. Morrison is a good man, but he thinks order is more important than flexibility. He thinks rules exist to be followed, period. But I've spent my whole life following rules, Michael. I know what that costs. And I know that sometimes the most important thing a person can do is know when to break them. But he felt lighter somehow, despite everything. Sir, can I ask you something? Of course. Was it worth it? All of this, the risk, the scandal, the investigations, was exposing those criminals worth the price? William didn't hesitate. Yes, absolutely. Those people stole from dying children, Michael. They looked at sick kids and their desperate families and saw opportunities for profit. They deserve everything that's coming to them. And the families who were denied help deserve justice. If my reputation takes a hit and your career gets complicated, that's still worth it. Even though we broke rules to make it happen, especially because we broke rules to make it happen. Because sometimes the rules protect the wrong people. Sometimes the system fails. And when that happens, individuals have to step up and do what's right, even if it costs them something. A knock on the door interrupted them. A young assistant poked her head in. "Your Highness, you have a call from the media office. It's urgent." William nodded. "Thank you. I'll be right there." Turned back to Michael. "That's probably about the statement I mentioned. Once I release it, things are going to move fast. You should prepare yourself for attention. Media will probably try to contact you. I won't talk to them." "Good. Don't let me handle the public part. You just focus on getting through the review committee." And Michael. William extended his hand. "Whatever happens, know that you did the right thing. History will remember these criminals being brought to justice. It might not remember your name, but I will. Always." Michael shook the prince's hand, feeling the firmness of the grip, the sincerity in the gesture. Then William left, and Michael was alone in Morrison's office. He sat down again, processing everything. In 2 weeks, a committee would decide his fate. They'd review his testimony, his actions, his breach of protocol. They'd weigh his years of service against his one major decision to trust a prince's word over established procedure. He had no idea which way they'd lean. His phone buzzed. A text from his sister. "Just saw the news. Are you okay?" "Call me." Michael smiled slightly. The story must be breaking. William's statement going public. The whole complicated mess becoming public. Knowledge. He stepped out of the office and walked through the palace corridors one more time, not knowing if he'd be allowed to walk them again. Guards nodded to him as he passed, and he wondered what they were thinking. Did they see him as a hero who'd helped expose corruption? Or as a traitor who'd broken the code? Probably both. Probably neither. Probably just another guard who'd found himself in the wrong place at the wrong time and had to make an impossible choice. Outside, rain was starting to fall again. Just like that night weeks ago when everything had changed. Michael stood at a window, watching water streak down the glass, and thought about oaths and choices and the space between following rules and doing what's right. 3 months later, the review committee reached their decision. Michael was not fired. Instead, he received a formal reprimand and was reassigned to a different post. The committee noted his years of exemplary service and the extraordinary circumstances of his breach. They also noted Prince William's public support and the ultimate positive outcome of the situation. But more importantly, they implemented new protocols. Guards could now flag unusual situations to a special oversight board without triggering immediate investigations. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. A recognition that sometimes rigid rules needed flexibility to serve justice. Sarah Keating testified at 3 trials. 9 people were ultimately convicted of fraud, theft, and conspiracy. The charity was restructured from the ground up. Millions of pounds were recovered and returned to legitimate causes. Families who'd been denied help received compensation. The system, however briefly, worked the way it was supposed to. Michael never met Sarah in person, but she sent him a letter. It was simple, handwritten, and the most meaningful thing he'd ever received. It said, "My brother's name was David. He was 12 years old when he died. He loved football and terrible jokes, and he wanted to be a teacher. Because of what you did, his death meant something. Because of what you did, other children will live. Thank you doesn't seem like enough, but it's all I have. Thank you." Michael kept that letter in his locker. On days when he questioned his choices, when he wondered if breaking protocol had been worth it, he'd read it again. And he'd remember that sometimes doing the right thing means accepting that not everyone will understand or approve. William visited him once more, a year later, in an unofficial capacity. They walked through the old gardens together, the same place where everything had begun. The rain had given way to sunshine. The hedgerows had been trimmed and maintained. Everything looked different in the daylight. "How are you doing?" William asked. "Really, I'm okay," Michael said. "The new post is good. Different, but good. And I don't wake up every morning wondering if today's the day they fire me. I'm glad. You deserved better than what you got, but I'm glad it wasn't worse." They walked in silence for a while, both remembering that tense night. The choices made. The risks taken. The lives changed. "Would you do it again?" William asked suddenly. "If you could go back, Knowing everything that happened, would you still let me walk out that door? Michael thought about it. About his career hanging in the balance. About the investigations and the stress and the whispers. About Sarah's brother David, who died too young. About children who would live because monsters had been caught. Yes, he said simply. I'd do it exactly the same way. William smiled. Good. That's what I thought. That's why I knew I could trust you that night. You're the kind of person who understands that some things matter more than safety and rules in careers. You're the kind of person who does what's right, even when it costs you something. I'm just a guard, sir. No, Michael, you're much more than that. You're someone who stood at a crossroads and chose conscience over comfort. That's rare. That's special. William looked back toward the palace, its ancient stones glowing in the afternoon light. The world needs more people like you. People who'll take the risk when it matters. They parted ways at the garden gate. William returned to his official duties, his public appearances, his carefully managed life. Michael returned to his post, his rounds, his quiet service. But both men carried something with them now. A shared secret. A shared choice. A shared understanding that sometimes the most important thing a person can do is know when to let someone walk into the darkness, trusting they'll find their way to the light. And in the end, that trust had been worth everything. The rain started falling again as Michael walked back toward the palace. He didn't rush to get inside. He let the water wash over him, cool and clean, and he smiled. Because he knew something that most people never learn. Sometimes breaking the rules is the only way to make things right. And sometimes, a single choice made in the middle of a rainy night can change everything. That night at his post, Michael stood straight and alert, doing the job he was trained for. But he was different now. Changed by what he'd seen, what he'd done, what he'd chosen. And he was ready. Ready for whatever came next. Ready to make another impossible choice if he had to. Because that's what good people do. They stand watch. They pay attention. And when the moment comes, when someone needs help, and the rule book doesn't have an answer, they trust their conscience instead of their fear. Michael had learned that lesson in the hardest way possible, and he'd never forget it. Neither would the prince who'd asked him to take the risk. Neither would the woman who'd lost her brother, but gained justice. Neither would the families who'd been denied help, but finally received it. They'd all remember the guard who'd looked away at the right moment and let the truth walk free.